Warning. Colon. No archive warnings apply. Category. FM. Fandom. Miraculous Ladybug. Relationships. Adrian Agreste Marinette Dupan Chang. Comma. Chat Noir Ladybug. Characters. Adrian Agreste. Comma. Marinette Dupan Chang. Comma. Nino Miraculous Ladybug. Comma. Aaliyah Miraculous Ladybug. Comma. Ladybug. Comma. Chat Noir. Additional tags. Characters are aged up to 17 for the majority of the fic. Comma. All NSFW sections are safe, sane, consensual, and non-fetishized. Comma. Just horny teens doing teen stuff. Comma. Smut is warned about ahead of time, so feel free to skip. Comma. This is mostly fluff and humor. Comma. And brief angst, but it's fine. Comma. Okay, tag time. Comma. Coming of age. Comma. Puberty. Comma. New relationship. Comma. Background DJ Wifi. Comma. Pre-reveal. Comma. Semi-reveal. Comma. Post-reveal. Comma. It's a long damn fic, y'all. Comma. Sexting. Comma. Phone sex. Comma. Dry humping. Comma. Clumsy hand jobs. Comma. Long fic. Close tab. Connection. Actions. Work header. The Ladybugs and the Bees. Bullysquadess. Chapter 39. Notes. Sup thoughts lol. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Closing parenthesis. Chapter text. That strange nagging feeling followed Adrian throughout the night, filling his dreams with confusing images and scenarios that slipped sand-like from his mind the moment he awoke. All he could recall were brief flashes, a hint of inky black hair, sometimes worn up and sometime laid loose. A laugh turned stutter turned flirtatious purr, whispered low in his ear. A strange shade of pink that looked red under moonlight, worn by a young woman with his mother's smile and his heart in her hand. Rising from his bed, Adrian ground his fists into his eye sockets, unable to shake the feeling he was just barely missing something important. Speaking of, he really needed to find out how Ladybug was smuggling things into his locker. Yesterday had been a love letter. Today, a Tupperware filled to the brim with all the sugary snacks he wasn't allowed to eat at home. Adrian knew his partner could be stealthy when she wanted to, but surely Paris's most recognizable figure sneaking onto a busy campus would draw attention from someone. That is, if she were sneaking in at all. Chapter text. Biting down on his biscotti, Adrian shook his head free of the thought. Certain coincidences he'd been noticing lately were far from solid proof, and he had other things to dwell on besides lipstick colors and familiar French lit textbooks tucked into the selfies his girlfriend had taken to sending him each morning. He could drive himself mad with theories, pushing pins into cork boards and connecting clues via red yarn, but it was an ultimately fruitless pursuit. Surely if Ladybug were as close as Adrian suspected she was, it wouldn't be long before she did something to reveal herself. Just so we're clear, everyone here is madly infatuated with Marinette, right? A dozen heads nodded in distracted affirmation. And this isn't considered voyeurism if we all keep our hands on the table. 12 more nods. Awesome, Aaliyah breathed, eyes never leaving the heaven-sent display taking place across the courtyard. Glad we're all on the same page. It was a widespread phenomenon at their school, had been since college really. Marinette Dupan Chang was the girl to crush on. Whether it be with random acts of kindness, an encouraging note pinned to the locker of a stressed-out sophomore, a macaroon pressed into the palm of the soccer player who'd missed his goal at the last game, etc., or through sheer sunny demeanor, Marinette had somehow managed to wrap nearly the entire student body around her little finger. With an infectious personality and dazzling appearance, she was the type of girl to sneak right into someone's heart, making herself at home before the owner even had a chance to protest. She was an enigma, an anomaly that existed outside of the normal bounds of mere romantic and sexual orientation. Falling for Marinette didn't make you anything, other than human, that is. And even though many of her admirers had since moved on, forging new relationships amongst themselves, it was still a universally understood rule that one never quite got over their Mari crush. Which is probably why her current position had drawn such a crowd. Aaliyah had been the first one to spot that blessed sight, elbowing Nino, who in turn elbowed Adrian, who'd somehow tripped and fallen into Ivan, who, well, you got the idea. It had taken all of 2 minutes for the founding members of the Madly in Love with Marinette club to congregate on and around one of the concrete tables that dotted the school's inner courtyard. Far enough to avoid immediate detection, but close enough to grant a front row seat to the show. And boy, was it a show. Legs folded delicately atop the bench, shoulders lounging against the backrest and head slightly ducked as she scanned the magazine before her, Marinette was looking criminally cute on this crisp fall day. With her flower-printed sweater and boots adorned with tiny pink puffballs, hair falling loose around her shoulders, she painted an image that's so deceptively adorable that it clashed almost jarringly with the less than innocent actions of her glossed-up lips. Lips that were currently teasing at the long, ridged, rainbow-striped lollipop that served as Marinette's lunch. "I just want everyone here to know that I'm simultaneously kink-shaming us all," Nino announced, his eyes fixed upon the curiously phallic candy concoction. "This is absolutely despicable behavior. She's got to know what she's doing, right?" Alex interjected, perched atop Kim's shoulders, her own eyes screwing up to survey the situation. "Have you seen her tongue?" Kim drawled from below. "It's pretty obvious she knows what she's doing." "Yeah, but does she know?" Came Julka's almost pitiful reply, one gloved hand swooping up to pull her bangs aside for a better view. The only answer she got was a collective intake of breath, the gathered teens leaning forward in anticipation as Marinette's tongue snuck out to swipe lazily across the tip, inspiring another chorus of muffled groaning. Her actions were mindless, effortless. It was obvious Marinette's sole attention was zeroed in on her fashion magazine, probably the only reason they'd yet to been busted for peeping, but her inattentiveness did little to dull the downright masterful way she went at her midday snack. Alternating between idle, devastating licks along the length and tiny, catastrophic twirls of her tongue at the very top, Marinette was unwittingly pulling moves that would put a porn star to shame. And when she let a single inch slip into her mouth, the subtle shift of her jaw hinted at some very creative tongue action going on behind the scenes. An almost palpable shiver ran through the group. "All right, I'll be the one to ask," Aaliyah sighed, as if she were about to shoulder an extraordinary burden. "What color?" Chapter text. The understanding was immediate, no clarification necessary. A shroud of contemplation fell over the crowd. You see, Marinette's lollipop was comprised of 6 colors. One for each sinful inch of candy. It was red at the tip, as if the shape alone wasn't suggestive enough, and purple at the base, following the flow of the rainbow as it radiated downward. So far, she had yet to venture past the warm tones, but the ardent peridots and steely indigos of places untouched sat in devious wait for her inevitable caress. "At this point I'd give up a kidney to see yellow," Nino admitted with an almost dreamy sigh. "You're underestimating her," Aaliyah assured him. "Green," Max piped up, clearing his throat from where his voice had cracked. "Given the average capacity of the female throat, cross-analyzed with her age and experience, I calculate she'll be able to reach the green stripe." A derisive snort sounded from the back. "Oh please. That's..." Chloe's snide interjection was cut off by a chorus of shushes, leaving her to stew in silence. She could deny it all she wanted, but the fact she'd still stuck around for Marinette's little display only confirmed her supposed dislike for her classmate was wholly fabricated. "I think she could take it down to purple," Mylene cut in, her voice soft but insistent. 6 inches is not that hard to handle." Now that almost drew a few stares, but it was at that exact moment Marinette decided to return to licking at her treat, and any questions over Mylene's supposed know-how quickly died upon the tongues that might have formed them. Chapter text. Now that almost drew a few stares, but it was at that exact moment Marinette decided to return to licking at her treat, and any questions over Mylene's supposed know-how quickly died upon the tongues that might have formed them. Speaking of tongues. Eyes never veering from her reading, Marinette tilted her head, dragging the lollipop lengthwise across her tongue. It spanned the whole damn rainbow, that clever little organ, dipping into the shallow ridges that spiraled along the confection before lapping at the sweet flavor. It tasted, teased, explored. And Adrian knew he was so fucked. He knew he should look away, if not out of deference to their friendship then out of respect for his own very committed relationship, and yet his eyes remained glued alongside his classmates as they spectated with bated breath. He tried futilely, for perhaps the millionth time since the start of Marinette's little snack break, to focus on anything but her mouth. He tried to focus on the homework beneath his hands, the Kwame snoring in his breast pocket. Hell, he'd even gotten so desperate as to run through the benchmarks of quantum theory. But alas, no amount of theoretical physics was enough to occupy his mind, it would seem. Not with Marinette. Down to bang both Ladybug and Chat Noir, Dupan Cheng performing fellatio on a sugar stick a mere courtyard away. Orange. Rose squeaked, voicing the thoughts shared by the group that surround her. She's hit orange. And she certainly had. Adrien locked up in place, swallowing hard as he watched Marinette's mouth wrap around the tip of the lollipop then sink down a good 2 inches. It was devious, the way she went at her treat. Devious, yet unintentionally so. And something about the notion this girl could render an entire squadron of teens to their metaphorical, and in the case of Nathaniel, literal, knees spoke volumes. Chapter text. Yellow, Nino corrected in a pitchy voice, removing his hat and running his fingers thought the short hair beneath, that's definitely yellow territory. She sunk lower still, and Adrien was devastated to find he had to bite back an honest-to-God whimper. Green, Rose breathed with a subtle undertone of pride, looks like she bottoms out at gray. Be blue. Came the distinctive voice of a certain hunched-over redhead, almost drowned out by the cacophony of stifled groans and gasps that rang out in response to Marinette dipping impossibly farther down. It was a certifiable code blue, people. This was not a fucking drill. Marinette's cheeks hollowed, plastering to the sides of the lollipop within, and when her nimble fingers reached out to twirl the wooden stick between 2 digits, the gathered students warbled with another wave of wrecked and appreciative sounds. It didn't matter that there were members of the group not equipped with the kind of, well, tools one might associate with the girl's actions. It didn't matter that half of the onlookers were already in relationships, some staring right alongside their partner. And Adrien tried to tell himself it didn't matter that he felt a stirring low in his gut when Marinette's eyelids fluttered shut. What he felt was inconsequential, purely physical. Yes. Aaliyah hissed out triumphantly, watching as her best friend finally breached purple. Damn, that's my girl. See. And better watch his fucking back, because I might just have to snap her right out from under him. Or atop him, Nino murmured, earning a few affirmative hums at the proposed mental picture. Chapter text. Meanwhile, Marinette just continued to idly suck away, now lightly pumping and twirling the lollipop as it slid between her lips. She'd obliterated the line between suggestive and cheeky, now charging straight into erotic territory, and Adrien found himself in urgent need of a tall glass of ice water, possibly cold shower as well. His last hazy thought before the bell rang, effectively halting Marinette's performance and drawing a chorus of complaints from the gathered crowd, was that CN was one lucky guy. Adrien watched, heart rate slowly descending back into its regular pulse, as Marinette withdrew the lollipop, its candy coating glistening with crystalline clarity in the sunlight. He watched as she slowly licked her lips of the lingering flavor, watched her throat bob as she swallowed the last bit of sweetness and finally had to stop watching as she leisurely pushed herself up from the bench to regroup with her friends. Scramble. Kim commanded, he and about half of the others situated around the table rushing to make themselves scarce. Still, a few people lingered, perhaps hoping to get a line in with the object of their infatuation. Adrien forcibly glued his attention to the worksheet below. I swear these lunch breaks keep getting shorter and shorter, Marinette announced as she rejoined them at the table. I hardly have time to finish anything. Her voice was too sweet, Adrien thought a bit plaintively, her tone too innocent in the wake of her prior actions. Oh, I don't think you need to worry about your ability to finish things, Aaliyah murmured under her breath, giving Adrien a suggestive elbow to the sides. He choked on air. Actions. Kudos. Comments. Header. Chapter text. You're keeping it? Nino asked skeptically, eyeballing the way Marinette wrapped her lollipop before stuffing it in her purse. Marinette shrugged. My French teacher is pretty lax when it comes to eating in class. If anyone noticed the way Adrien suddenly seized up, there was never a mention. I'll just finish it then. Are you sure you'll even want it later? Nino asked. Please, Marinette said with a dismissive wave of her hand, the other yanking her magazine out from under her armpit. I could go at that thing for hours. There was a spattering of stifled coughing, accompanied by the swift exit of the lingering crowd, and suddenly it was just Marinette's three best friends that remained. Wide-eyed and gaping at her double-edged response. Hours. Adrian heard himself stutter out, and was immediately hit with the overwhelming urge to slam his head against the table in regret. This was not a conversation to be having with his sweet, kind, innocent, sexy platonic, he meant to say platonic, friend. Even if she had put on what could arguably be classified as a softcore porno right before his eyes. Marinette turned to Adrian, her lips do not think about her lips, quirking up into a pleasant smile as she slid her magazine down into her shoulder bag. The publication was still folded open to the page she'd left off on, and Adrian felt his throat run dry as he saw the word, Gabriel, printed in a dignified font across the header. Actions. Kudos. Comment. Chapter text. As well as the image of his smirking, leather-clad self nestled beneath it. Hours. Marinette purred, granting Adrian a final, inscrutable look before turning to slowly saunter away. The noise of the busy hallways was perhaps the only thing keeping Marinette on her feet. At this point she was practically a ghost. A ghost running on caffeine, sugar, and the desire to not fail her midterms. Between getting up early to help her parents with the seasonal rush in the morning and sneaking into a certain boyfriend's bedroom late at night, she'd been surviving on an average of 4 hours of sleep per night for the past week, and it was beginning to take its toll. To top it all off, she'd completely forgotten to pack a lunch today, meaning she'd had to scavenge her locker for something remotely edible. Though, in the end, that mistake had actually worked in her favor. Marinette hadn't even planned on using the unicorn lollipop she'd bought at a school fundraiser a few weeks back in her grand seduction, but then moment she'd spotted Adrian alongside the majority of her class watching her from across the courtyard, she just knew she had to put on a show. It was easy, really, and boy was it effective. In fact, Marinette was a little disappointed in herself for not thinking of it earlier. Discovering the Gabriel ad halfway through the magazine she was browsing had just been the icing on the cake, and she was pretty sure she'd never forget the expression on Adrian's face when he'd realized what she'd been looking at whilst she enjoyed her midday treat. It was very similar to the expression he wore now, watching her intently as she entered the classroom. Actions. Kudos. Comments. Header. Chapter text. Hey there, Adrian, Marinette said sweetly, taking her assigned seat to his left. Adrian returned her greeting with a quick nod, his eyes darting almost imperceptibly to her bag before attaching themselves to the textbook in front of him, and Marinette almost snickered at just how very bad of a poker face he had. The way his body stiffened as she pulled out her half-finished lollipop, his Adam's apple bobbing as he very visibly swallowed, was so simultaneously expectant and agitated that she had to ask herself, had she crossed the line between flirtatious and needlessly cruel? Unfortunately, Marinette didn't get the chance to ponder the cruelty of her seduction before the faint sound of a nearby Akuma echoed through the open window, spurring her to action. This time neither the teacher nor Adrian tried to stop her as she bolted from the classroom, assumedly headed for the nurse's office to treat the stomach ache she quite suddenly complained about, so finding a nearby janitor's closet and suiting up was no problem. Ladybug was already 2 blocks over and closing in on the Akuma when Chat Noir caught up, greeting her with a wave as he vaulted alongside her. From there it was a simple matter of discovering the hoop delivery boy, and the white non-existent tipper, of the situation before locating where the Akuma was trapped, and using Lucky Charm clothes hanger to nab it. When all was said and done the battle took a neat half hour, leaving 2 victorious heroes to wave for the cameras before leaping over the nearest building and out of public sight. Pound it, Ladybug trilled, hoping her exhaustion wasn't evident in her voice. She held her fist out for their customary bump, expectant, but it never came. Instead Chat grabbed her hand and twined their finger together, his eyes finding hers. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if searching for something in her face, and Ladybug squirmed under his appraisal, unable to escape the feeling he knew more than he was letting on. Actions. Kudos. Comments. Chapter text. What? She finally asked, aiming for playfulness but unable to quell her nervous chuckle. Now slowly circling her, Chat shrugged, as if his behavior were completely normal and not the actions of a psychopath. What? Nothing, he finally answered, giving her face one last inscrutable sweep before he shook his head free of whatever thought had come over him. In its place sat an almost bemused smile, turned dangerous by the curiosity still lingering behind his eyes. I just missed you is all. Suddenly, Chad leaned down, wrapping an arm around her slender waist to haul her in for a kiss, and she forgot all about her lethargy as she instinctively melted into the embrace. His tongue was uncharacteristically insistent, she thought. Almost desperate in the way he sought to explore her. Ladybug was used to being the aggressor in these types of situations, especially since the incident by the billboard had made him wary to initiate contact, but the sudden passion was far from unappreciated. Her eyelids fluttered shut as she basked in the sensation. You taste so sweet today, Chad murmured between kisses. Like candy. Ladybug stiffened. Surely that was a coincidence, right? Surely he wasn't referencing anything in particular. Just a causal observation, or one of his usual lovesick musings. The feeling of clawed fingers playfully pinching at her backside broke her from her reverie. Someone's needy today, Ladybug teased through a breathless laugh. I wonder what's got you all wound up, she mused, as if she didn't already know. Can I not thank my girlfriend for bringing me breakfast? He countered, eyes once again finding her lips seconds before his mouth followed. They shared another brief but heated kiss, before Chad broke their contact with a contented hum. Also, how do you keep sneaking me things? Actions. Kudos. Chad Noir cocked his head, giving her face another obvious sweep, and this time she met his appraisal with confidence, almost daring him to make the connection. Come on, kitty, you're so close. Her miraculous beeped. We should probably get going, Chad said after a short eternity, and Ladybug dispelled the breaths she hadn't been aware of holding. Yeah, you're right, she conceded, reaching reluctantly for her yo-yo. Before she could grab it, his gloved hand grasped hers, bringing it up to feather his customary kiss across her knuckles. Ladybug's cheeks bloomed pink. See you later, Chad asked hopefully, giving her fingers a quick squeeze. His expression still held a curiosity she wasn't quite sure how to react to, inspiring nerves and giddiness alike and driving her to give him one final peck on the lips. Sooner than you think, Ladybug whispered to his retreating back, her heart beating oddly as she watched him bolt off towards the school. Natalie was not pleased. That much was obvious. And when Natalie wasn't pleased, she made sure everyone around her wasn't pleased either. Actions. Kudos. Comments. Chapter text. Your behavior tonight was unacceptable. Completely unbefitting of an aggressed. Really? Adrian replied, slurring just the teensy bit as he focused on crossing through the front door without tripping on the door jamb. He made it past in one piece, though the sight of the winding staircase between him and his bedroom made his temples pound even harder than the 5, or was it 6, glasses of champagne he'd downed at the gala. I could have sworn getting drunk and making a scene was a family tradition. Don't start, Natalie warned, hints of venom seeping into her usual clipped tone. Adrian stayed silent, but rolled his eyes at her hypocrisy. Oh sure, when his father went on a cognac bender and had a shouting match with a foreign dignitary complete with a toppled bronze bust and no less than 6 destroyed paintings, he was a passionate discussionist who wasn't afraid to make his voice heard. When his mother drank mimosas by the pitcher full and wound up face down in a bistro planter box at 10:38 on a Tuesday morning, she was a typical young starlet enjoying her time off between movie shoots. But God forbid Adrian lose track of how much champagne he'd drank and accidentally stumble a bit when he'd stood to accept the philanthropist award on behalf of his currently abroad father. Hell, it wasn't like he was hammered. He was just a bit more buzzed than what was usually appropriate for a charity banquet. Sue him. You will go straight to bed and we will further discuss this in the morning, his handler instructed, as if he were some child who needed scolding. She didn't even wait for his response before she turned on her heel and made for her own quarters, leaving him alone to stew. It was through sheer luck and determination Adrian made it up the steps unscathed, staying steady on his feet till he finally plopped down in his desk chair, kicking his shoes off and loosening his tie in one fluid motion, if clumsy motion. He didn't like the way his head swam with the movement, and personally didn't see the appeal in being drunk. He'd only drank because he'd been in public, surrounded by people he would never choose to surround himself with, and had been expected to deliver a speech on how selfless and altruistic his dear old father was. Actions. Kudos. Chapter text. As you can imagine, it had taken a great deal of time and embellishment on Adrian's part to scrape up a few decent words about the man. This was, of course, written in his own personal time, of which Adrian had roughly 10 minutes of each day. Between classes, shoots, tutoring, extracurriculars, homework, and miraculous-related activity his schedule was booked solid, and any shred of free time was usually reserved for sleeping. Usually, being the key word here, as the last few nights had been occupied by visits from Ladybug Tilda, Adrian crooned, smiling dopily at his desktop background. It was the mother of all collages, made exclusively for him by none other than Aaliyah, aka Ladybug's second biggest fan, and he adored it. That beautiful clusterfuck of roughly 122 ladybugs in different action poses never failed to make him grin. Never failed to make him love and cherish and miss his darling girlfriend with a fervor only heightened by his slight inebriation. She'd been ravenous for attention lately, much to Adrian's delight, and the fact she hadn't contacted him at all tonight was suddenly cause for concern. It was late, nearing 2 a.m., and Adrian was tired. Tired and tipsy and desperate to hear that lovely voice he missed in Ladybug's absence. So it's understandable, really, that he might be a bit clumsy in pulling his phone out of his breast pocket. Understandable that his finger would accidentally press FaceTime instead of call. Understandable that he wouldn't even recognize his mistake until she picked up. ... Until Marinette motherfucking Dupan Cheng picked up. Actions. Kudos. Comments.